Just how interesting of a bass line can you play using only the notes in a dominant seventh chord? Well, I'm going to show you something right now, and it is awesome. Hi, I'm John Liebman, and welcome to another edition of The Essence of Groove. Now, in the last several lessons, we've been talking about all kinds of arpeggios. A broken chord, when you play the notes of a chord one at a time. That's an arpeggio. And we covered 3-note arpeggios, 4-note arpeggios, major, minor chords. In this lesson, we're going to focus solely on the dominant seventh chord. Now, to review, a dominant seventh chord is just a major triad with a minor seventh. That sound is pretty familiar to our ears, right? And what I want to show you is a number of ways that you can use your creativity to just take those 4 notes in a dominant seventh chord, any dominant seventh chord, and make up an interesting bass line. If the song calls for it, if it helps the music, if it's gonna, no, not just because you can do it, but because it genuinely enhances the sound. I always have to get that caveat in there, even though I know you already know that, right? So let's take a couple examples here. A dominant seventh chord. Let's play, for example, a blues. It's always a good example, a good place to start. Okay, simple, straightforward blues with kind of a shuffle feel. I played nothing more in that entire example than the 4 notes in a dominant seventh chord. There were 3 different chords. We played an A7, a D7, and an E7, but still, in each case, I played nothing more than the 4 notes in each chord. So in the A7 chord, in the D7 chord, and the E7 chord. Now, remember we talked about shapes in some of the earlier lessons. Shapes are just the way that you configure your fingers over the fretboard, over the frets. So, the very common way to play a major triad, or the start of a dominant seventh chord, would be with our second finger. In this case, we're going to take our second finger and play it on the 5th fret of the E string, the A note. And then we'll play the next note, our C sharp, which is the 3rd of the chord, using our first finger on the 4th fret of the A string. And we'll play the 5th of the chord with our pinky on the 7th fret of the A string. And then we'll play the 7th, which is a G natural, on, usually we use our second finger. Most people find that the most natural and the most comfortable. So again, our second finger on the 5th fret of the D string to play the G note. So this is a very important shape, very handy and helpful shape for you to know on the bass. And get that sound in your head so you'll know if you're playing the right notes. And learn that shape. Now, you may have noticed when I got to the E chord, I used a different shape, another one that we also talked about in the previous lessons. Instead of moving up here, I mean, we could have moved up and used the same shape when we got to the E chord. But in this case, I started with my pinky because my hand was already in that position. And you may recall, I told you it's a very handy and very practical thing to be able to play a chord across 3 strings of the bass, because that way you can play them all in the same position. So we're playing the exact same pitches. The only difference is we're playing the B on the 4th fret of the G string instead of the 9th fret of the D string. And that helps us avoid the shift. It's not a big shift, but why shift at all if we don't have to? So get that sound in your head first, remember, and then get those shapes under your fingers. Let's try another feel. Let's say we want to do, I don't know, just an easy rock tune, a rock groove. Okay, I'm not always playing the notes in the order of the arpeggio. Sometimes I'm mixing them up. There are an unlimited number. You know, let me tell you, every song that you're going to play, a lot of songs have nothing but dominant 7th chords. A lot of blues tunes, of course, a lot of jazz tunes, a lot of rock and pop tunes, but even songs that have other chords in addition to dominant 7th chords have dominant 7th chords in there somewhere. Trust me, they're in there. But it also doesn't have to be a blues. We can do something like okay? You get the idea. I'm just making this up off the top of my head. But the point is, as I also always talk about, the awesome consistency of the bass, which means if you can play something anywhere on the bass, you can play it pretty much everywhere on the bass because you learn those shapes. You learn where to move your fingers, how to move your fingers, and you can play any dominant 7th chord, any key. Okay, and you want to use the other fingering. Okay, now you may have noticed in this thing that I just played here, the shapes are altered a little bit. I always say if you can play it anywhere, you can play it pretty much everywhere. There are a couple of exceptions which actually can be used to our advantage. And that's if we're going to start on the 1st fret of the bass or if we're going to start on the open string. So for example, if we're playing an F7 chord, starting with our 1st finger on the 1st fret of the E string, the F, we play the open A, okay, remember that's the same sound. We said we're going to get that sound in our head. It's just a slightly different shape, different fingering because we have that open string available to us. And the same thing if we start on B flat, 1st fret of the A string. Okay, so that's the one exception when we start on the 1st fret. The other is if we start on an open string. Okay, remember we got that sound in our head. And then same thing if we start on the A string. So get the sounds in your head, get the shapes under your fingers, okay, starting with the 2nd finger on the for the 1st note, or starting with your pinky on the 1st note. Those are the two main ones because those work all the way up and down the bass. Then the two exceptions, when we start on the 1st fret and when we start with the open string. And then as long as you've got those 4 notes under your fingers, you can play them and mix and match and go up and down and play in all different keys. I'm just making a point here that the better command you have of each of those chords, the shapes, the sounds, the fingerings, all the stuff we talked about, then you're limited by your ability, which will increase as you practice more and as you get this stuff under your fingers. And however far you want to push yourself and how creative you want to be, it's a great way to learn your way all up and down the bass. It's a great way to reinforce your music theory, and it's a great way to enhance your bass lines using just the notes inside a dominant 7th chord, but only if it helps the song. Try it. I want to hear your experience. I want to hear what kind of results you get. Start slow. You don't have to get fancy. Just learn the chords, learn the shapes, learn the fingerings, and it doesn't even have to follow a song necessarily. You can just there's a lot you can do with just 4 notes, moving all up and down the bass, taking advantage of the shapes that you know, the fingerings you know, and all that other stuff. I've got all kinds of tips and advice for learning bass, so if you're not already subscribed to this channel, take care of that right now so you don't miss anything. And I will see you right back here next week, same time, same place, with another edition of The Essence of Groove. I'm John Liebman. Let's play bass. Thank you.